Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, get their revenge from that 2023 year against the Washington Huskies in what might have been the cleanest and most dominant football game that we've seen from Oregon all of 2024. And that's saying something because this Oregon team has clearly been the best team in the country all regular season long. Dill, two takeaways off the top. One, Dan Lanning freaking loves these moments, and you see that get reflected with the players. We saw a lot of big games happen yesterday on Saturday. Coaches like Ryan Day, clearly scared of the moment, clearly nervous. That's reflecting with this team. You look at Dan Lanning taking that pregame interview on this look that he has in his eyes. This dude loves these kind of moments, and that kind of resonates throughout his team. Even when they're not playing their best football. Think about a couple of weeks ago going on the road to Madison, Wisconsin, played maybe C-minus football in a hostile environment. Going into the fourth quarter, the jump around comes on and Oregon's going nuts. Like this team lives for these moments, and that matters when you start playing postseason college football. That is something I'm very confident in with this Oregon team. I think secondly, Dill, where did Oregon fall short in 2023? What was that one thing that we say that Oregon team was damn good in 2023? They checked a lot of boxes. What kind of prevented them from being a national championship caliber team? Probably those difference makers on the defensive line. Dill, 10 sacks, 16 tackles for a loss Saturday night. And those numbers are what numbers you put up against like the FCS teams early in September. And Oregon did that week to the last game of the regular season going into the Big Ten championship game. This defensive line is dominating up front, and this Oregon defense has largely transformed into one of the better units that we see across the country heading into the postseason. Really, one of those performances that if you're an Oregon fan, that's what you needed to see before going into postseason play. Fired up to get into this one now. Before we do, and as always, one to the Oregon Duck fans, y'all have known the boys have had a blast talking this team all 2024 and really going back to the months of December and January, talking about this team in the transfer portal. A lot of y'all have been rocking with the boys since then. We can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, without further ado, let's get into this one. I'll give you the tee box here. Where do you want to go from this Oregon Ducks performance?
And I'd start with the defensive line, but probably not with we know Jamari Caldwell, Mateo Yu, they've been playing dominant all year. They've been kind of leading the way. Jordan Birch, when he's been healthy, you certainly could throw in that mix of like those dominant guys consistently. But I think you'll look at like the secondary guys. Jamari Caldwell is really starting to dominate football games. Not just play good football. He's played good football all year for sure, but he's being disruptive. He's creating sacks, TFLs. I look at a guy like Amari Washington. He hasn't played like that all year. I thought he put together a really dominant game. You look even like a guy like Jaden Moore off the edge, giving them good reps. You just this is becoming a much deeper unit than I think that was going to be the question. Like you knew the top end talent was there. I think you see the depth there, their ability to rotate in sustained dominance for all four quarters. Very, very impressed with that.
The depth on this defensive line, you don't always talk about it, and the national media is not always going to talk about it. When you want to win in the postseason, when you want to win in the fourth quarter, keeping those big bodies fresh and, not having the level of play drop off that much when you're rotating the twos in. It's something that I think's made Georgia so I think it's something that made Michigan so great in 2023. It's something that makes Oregon great in 2024. Jamari Caldwell. Look, Derek Carmen, we've been talking about Derek Carmen all year. Derek Carmen's arguably been the best interior defensive lineman in the country. We've talked about Mateo. We've talked about Tatum, Jordan Birch coming back. We all know those players are great. The way Jamari Caldwell has played the last two games, go back to Wisconsin, that was kind of his coming out party. And you're right. Jamari Caldwell has played good football all year. He hasn't been bad, but he hasn't necessarily dominated. When you get Derek Carmen and Jamari Caldwell dominating on the inside of the defensive line, massive storyline. Now, to couple that with a very good defensive line, these linebackers, that was another thing that we kind of wanted to see the linebackers be a little bit more of difference makers. Bryce Betcher's playing like one of the best backers in all of college football, and that's not a shot at some of the other backers on this team. Devin Jackson, Bossa, they've played good. Bryce Betcher seems to be like the heartbeat of this Oregon Ducks defense, and he just continues to play at a all-American level, for lack of better terms.
He's giving them the impact play. Again, Bossa, I think Bossa Betcher's been a really good tandem for the most part. It seems like they have kind of settled on that. as being the down and down
Yeah,
out kind of
yep.
rotation, if you will. Like you look at the way Bryce Betrick can create negative plays, attacks the line of scrimmage, can go sideline to sideline. He's giving them much more of that complete all down linebacker, can cover well, can blitz, can make plays in the run, can shed blocks. Like he's just played complete ball in the way. I think you look at the Georgia linebackers under Dan Lanning, you wanted to see that translate a little bit more to Oregon, more than it did, frankly, the past year or two. You're starting to see
It's
it.
like a double-edged sword. Like as this defensive line that begins to take over games, like it's just making the linebackers' job easier. Like when you have a defensive line that is, eating up double teams and getting a lot of penetration and winning at the point of attack, all of a sudden your linebackers are playing clean. There's not a lot of traffic for them to have to pick through. And when you get good linebacker play behind a really good defensive line, that's how you take over football games. And that's kind of what Oregon, I thought, did in this football game. And one thing we should have noted at the top, Damon Williams can play. I love watching this kid play, and I think Washington has a gamer and true freshman Damon Williams, who went on the road to Autzen Stadium in a rivalry game. You saw some freshman stuff from Damon Williams. There's no secret about that, but you also saw some high level stuff and some real playmaking ability at the quarterback spot. And there was a little bit of that adjustment period for Oregon where it's like, hey, we got to keep this kid in the pocket. He's a sub-11 guy in the 100-meter. He's got some serious burners and some real good feel for being an athlete at the quarterback spot, too. Once Oregon addressed that, it was kind of wraps. Like Washington really struggled to move the football, but I did want to shout out.
See like the team speed of that Oregon unit. Like again, their
Yeah, it
second
helps.
run, their linebackers run, their defensive linemen run. Like Jordan Birch being able to chase him around and get him to the ground. Like that was kind of the missing piece for Jordan Birch. Like you knew he was big, strong, physical defensive end, but you didn't always have that like extra gear, if you will, to make those type of plays. Again, him making those type of plays, like they've got guys playing at a different level than what they were. Again, they brought some talent in, but their guys from last year also playing a heck of a lot better than what
Jordan Birch can move, man. Like he's a big boy. And even going back to that fake punt you saw a couple weeks ago, he looked like Trayshawn Olin moving there. Like the Jordan Birch can boogie. Last thing I'll say in the defense, and we said this was going to be a massive storyline, like tackling in space. We knew this Jetfish offense was going to test your ability to tackle in space. The ball was going to come out quick. They only missed 8 tackles in this game, and that seemed like they were grading them hard. That's what PFF told me. I didn't see many missed tackles in that football game. Only 72 yards after the catch. That's a really good number when you're playing the Washington Huskies. And Jonah Coleman, who I think is one of the best running backs, not only in the Big Ten, but in the country, had 11 carries for 3 yards, 0.3 yards per carry. I think that was the recipe for Oregon. Stop the run on first and second down, force Washington in third and longs, get after Damon Williams, keep in the pocket, go sack him. And once Oregon started doing that, it became very difficult for Washington to move the football. Now, moving over to the offensive side of the football, and this is what I love about this Oregon offense. It's multidimensional. And there was some frustration on my part for seeing Oregon go on the road and play Wisconsin and not try to establish the run. And once they did in the fourth quarter, like they kind of put that game away, they came into this game saying, hey, Washington's got a very good secondary, like top 5 in the country in terms of some of the numbers that you look at. And it's not saying Dan Lanning or Dylan Gabriel can't throw the football in this secondary. He threw for over 200 yards, was solid. But where you wanted to attack this Washington team was along the line of scrimmage. The game plan was simple from the rip. We are going to run some gap. We're going to run some inside zone. We're going to move these guys off the offensive line of scrimmage. And Jordan James is going to run like somebody insulted his mother, because Jordan James was just and Noah Whittington too. It was everybody. I mean, they just established the run. They ran the football for 226 yards, 6.5 yards per carry. Key stat for Oregon on offense: don't take negative plays. Make sure you're staying on schedule. 0 sacks, 0 tackles for loss. This no secret. They were 5 of 8 on third downs because they weren't in any third and long situations. This Oregon offense, they kind of knew the game plan heading in, and that's what makes this offense so hard to deal with. Is you might see a team where the secondary has problems, but the front seven's good. All right, then we'll throw for 400 yards on them. Okay, we see a Washington defense that the secondary is really good. Front seven has some question marks. Let's go run the ball for 225 yards and just control this game from the rip. It's kind of what you saw Oregon do.
Yeah, and we've known that's been in the bag. It's been like, again, it doesn't always feel like they've totally committed to running the ball in certain spots. You look at the Wisconsin game, felt like they could have gotten to it more aggressively, if you will, and just really hammered that team down. I will say the passing game I thought looked cleaner. It's not like they
Yes.
did a ton of passing necessarily, but that's frankly the performance you want from that passing attack. Not a ton like high completion percentage, making some explosive plays. Trayshawn Holden being able to rip those off, like that's the type of thing you wanted to see. Obviously, had some drops. Even I think Stewart didn't play his best game. It
No,
didn't feel like
it's pretty bad.
they were able to make some plays in the passing attack. And then even Tez Johnson's like return, like, yeah, didn't have a big game in the stat sheet, but in important moments in the red zone and
Yep.
on third down, like that scramble drill with Tez Johnson being able to link up with that on the sideline. Like those are type of plays that felt like they were missing a little bit at times in his absence. Like his situational ability to make plays in those type of moments, I think they certainly need it.
Yeah, I think it comes down to Oregon being able to do it in different ways. And this particular game, hey, we want to lean on an offensive line that can row great in the run game. We're going to do that. And that multidimensionality, not being a one-dimensional offense, really, really big for Oregon. And it's going to be really, really big for them in the postseason as well. In the run game, took a lot. One, play action. They were working some play action, which I loved. Number two, it took some pressure off the Oregon offensive line of pass protection. Like when you're running the football the way you are and you're staying in those 2nd and 3s and 3rd and shorts, staying out of those 3rd and long passing situations helps an offensive line and pass pro. Dillon Gabriel was under pressure 2 times. He dropped back 25 times to throw. He's under pressure twice. I mean, it wasn't just 0 sacks, 0 TFLs. Like Dillon Gabriel was clean and really could operate from the pocket when they wanted to throw. But the story was Jordan James, Noah Whittington, we're going to feed you and let you win this game for us. And that's what Oregon did. Dill, look, I don't think Dan Lanning was like scared of Ohio State. You know, Dan Lanning's not one of those coaches where he's like, I don't want to see Ohio State again. That's not the mentality Dan Lanning has. I'm not trying to insinuate that. You'd rather play Penn State than Ohio State. That's who you get in the Big Ten championship game. Shout out the boys from Michigan getting it done. We'll sign out there again. Oregon going into the Big Ten championship game in college football playoffs with just a ton of momentum. And Dilly, you look across the landscape, there's just not many teams that have been as consistent, as good as Oregon. Like going into the playoffs, this to me is the best team in the country. Texas looked really good. And Oregon, you got to play good in the college football playoffs and Big Ten championship. This was the result that you wanted to see. We'll sign out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it again. The Oregon fans, all the support means the absolute world. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.